as masks and gloves start to appear again in the many stores, I have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
One, can they actually be reused, these quote unquote disposable masks and gloves? So that's sort of A. And the B part of it is, if not, would you know of any sort of stores, wholesalers, websites, whatever it happens to be, where people might be able to get their hands on them for just a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, so can we reuse the products? So the mask, I would say for sure. I think with the mask, people need to understand is that when we wear the mask outside in public, we're protecting the public against us. So if I speak and I spit, if I cough and the droplets come out, if I sneeze and the droplets come out, if I sneeze and my automatic reaction is to cover my sneeze, then I have some dirty hands potentially. So it's basically to protect anything that I have. Now, if everybody else in the outside environment at large, in the grocery store or in the park or whatever, if they're wearing masks, then they're protecting you from them, right? So if you are in an environment and you're uncomfortable, then you probably want to keep that a bigger distance, take a wider distance between someone who's not wearing a mask, or we don't have an actual barrier like the cashiers have those big plastic barriers, right? Because the interaction between you two is safer if there's a physical barrier, like the mask or the plastic shield in front of the cashier. So I would say that you could use your mask repeatedly. The other thing is that, a lot of people made these beautiful like fabric masks that were so fun. It was such a big trend. If you had someone who was crafty in your family, they made masks for everyone, and they're totally washable, and that's totally fine. The problem with the mask is if they get saturated, they get wet. What happens is that they can become just a nice little home for bacteria and virus too. So once they're wet, with there's moisture when we breathe, and so if the inside gets too saturated, or there was a splash, or there's so you want to just make sure that if you used it for a short period of time in and out of the grocery store, I've seen my neighbor, he hangs his on the rear view mirror and then he puts it on again. As long as it's staying dry, you got to remember that bacteria and virus like a wet environment. They like a moist environment. So the mask needs to stay dry. Once that mask gets compromised because it's wet and the potential is something that grew there, then you don't want to keep touching it and then putting it on your face, because maybe it's not COVID, but it could be definitely something else that's growing on it, and you want it. So I would say you can probably use your mask a couple times. Gloves are a little bit different, I think, because once you wear them, you touch everything in an outside environment, so you don't know if there's COVID on them. So I don't know if it's so reasonable to then kind of touch everything in your home, get to a sink and wash the outside of the gloves and then take the gloves off, because everything like on the outside of the glove is dirty. So I would say with the gloves, you probably just want to use them once. The other thing that you're super conscious of, and I never even noticed, and I don't know if that got how I got sick, is the number of times human beings touch their face. Just even in this interview, you probably see that I'm like pushing my glasses up, or I cover my face when I laugh, or whatever we do, but we touch our faces frequently. And so I think the gloves may give us a false sense of security that we think we have them on. So now it's okay. I can do whatever, I can touch whatever I can, you know what I mean? And then oops, I had virus, I had COVID on my glove and I've touched something, or I've touched somebody else. And so, yeah, they can be an expense. But the other thing you got to keep in mind is the alcohol rubs are really, really good. Hand washing is really, really good. So if in most places right now, if they have their infection control practices in order, they give you the opportunity to wash on the way in and wash on the way out. So there's an alcohol rub station at the entrance of every grocery store right now that I've been to. And there's alcohol rub in my car console. So when I get into the car, so if I leave the car, this, enter the store, this, leave the store, rub, back to the car, rub. So it's actually, you've probably reduced the risk greater than just wearing the glove and then thinking, oh, well, I got the gloves on, but then I've worn them into the store, out of the store, into the car, and now I'm driving, and I'll take them off when I get home, right? Because they're contaminated now. Now it's on your steering wheel. So hand washing and alcohol and rubbing alcohol rubs are pretty effective. So I don't know if people need to go through the expense of buying gloves. If it makes you feel that much better, I think go ahead, because I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. But you do have to remember that there could be a false sense of security. And, you know, if that's still worth it to you and it still makes you feel better, go right ahead. There's an appropriate application for gloves for sure for caregivers anyways, because if you're cleaning somebody or you're doing personal hygiene tasks, I mean, it's appropriate if there's some bodily fluids that you're going to be exposed to. And sometimes you just want that physical barrier, do what you're doing, and then they're gone to the garbage anyways when you're done.
When it comes to the disposable masks, the person who you're looking after at home, would you always give them a new mask? Even if as a caregiver, there is potential for you to reuse your mask?
So I think it depends on what the chronic illness might be. If it has anything to do with being respiratory in nature, you do not want to give someone, put them in a situation where they're going to end up having difficulty breathing, or that they're short of breath because they can't move the air as easy because they're in a mask, or their disease causes them to not be able to take these really beautiful, great big breaths. And so putting something on to cover their nose and their mouth makes it just that little bit more difficult to move the air in and out. And so you get them in a position where they're having trouble breathing. So that you have to be conscious of, you know, and the level of comfort. So I would say yes, if they can manage. Right? If your care recipient, your loved one, your family member can manage to wear the mask comfortably, then, you know, go ahead and make sure you put that on them. And if it makes everybody feel good, that's great. I think if there is some difficulty breathing and the mask compromises their level of comfort, I think what happens is that you should probably minimize the number of environments they have to enter. And right now, a lot of doctors' offices are making you know, can you please wait in the car? And then there's this period of delay between patients. Hopefully they're doing some really good cleaning in between. And then off you and your care recipient go to your appointment, and then back to the car. So the risk of exposure to COVID should be decreased in that scenario. And so if they can't manage to wear a mask, they should still be safe.
There are conversations currently going on about finding ways to make masks more comfortable to wear and accessible for free. We're not there yet, but do know that authorities are increasingly recognizing the barriers to mask wearing and are trying to implement some solutions that will promote mask usage in indoor public places. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to take our quick survey to give us your feedback. Find the link in the video description below.